Okay, we have a lot to get to with Brendan Batchelor. If we can bring him in now from Vancouver, the radio voice of the Vancouver Canucks. I appreciate whenever the hockey guys join us in the offseason because it's busy enough during the season. Batch, how is the month of August going for you, man? You having a good one out there?
Yeah, it's been great. I've been spending a lot of time in the Okanagan, actually, with family. So in beautiful Penticton, British Columbia, and just trying to relax and recharge here a bit ahead of the start of the hockey season in earnest in September.
Well, I appreciate the time. We will not keep you long. As you know, we do move these quick. And I want, if you don't mind, your take on the Erik Karlsson trade coming out of the weekend. I would think you're happy to have him out of the Pacific Division, not have to contend with him anymore and his 100-plus points. Do you think there's a winner of this trade? What are your thoughts?
I really like what the Pittsburgh Penguins have done here. And, in the long term, it'll be interesting to see where their organization heads. But anytime you still have Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin on your roster, you're going to try and win now. And you bring in a defenseman like Erik Karlsson. You didn't have to give a ton up in terms of value. The first round pick, obviously, the most notable part of that trade. But you've got Crosby, you've got Malkin, you've got Letang, you've got these aging players anyway. Why not bring in a player that kind of fits that same profile? Have a few more kicks at the can here to see what you can do in the Stanley Cup playoffs over the next few years. And then when all these guys are retiring or coming to the end of their careers, it'll all be happening at the same time. And that's when you can go through your rebuild as a team. So I really like what Kyle Dubas has done since arriving in Pittsburgh, putting his stamp on that organization. And they're going to be a fun team to watch in the short term. And then in the long term, they'll have a lot of work to do to rebuild that roster once Crosby and Malkin and Letang and Karlsson are gone.
Well, he's very popular, Kyle Dubas, in that market right now. So like you, I'm hoping for the best. Now, you saw Erik Karlsson up close more than ever the last couple of years in San Jose, and he's coming off a year where he was voted the best defenseman in the National Hockey League. So what do you think about this guy, Brendan? How good is he?
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to see how he fits in Pittsburgh, because I think the reason he had so much success in San Jose, and particularly so much offensive success, is because he was given a complete green light because that was not a good team. So why not put up your points if you know you're going to lose the game anyway? What's the difference between losing 7-3 or 7-5 if you can pot a couple of goals or set a couple up? But now that you're on a team that will have playoff aspirations and realistic ones, adding Karlsson, I would imagine his point totals will come down a bit because that green light won't necessarily be there to the same extent. But, can he help them improve, take a step back in the direction they want to go after a disappointing finish to this past season where they just missed out on the playoffs right at the end of the regular season? Karlsson gives them an added punch. He's another dynamic player that produce offense on their power play. So, as I said, I like the fit, but it'll be more about team success than individual success for Erik Karlsson going forward. So I wouldn't be picking him to win the Norris Trophy next year. I think a large part of why he did so this past year is because of the point production. And I don't think he'll produce the same number of points on the Penguins, but he'll have more team success than he did in San Jose, to say the least.
Well, speaking of the disappointing end, we've got the biggest Vancouver Canucks fan I know. Kevin, the medium, certainly here in Century Downs, had just walked into the building, so he'll perk up for this badge. When I ask you, what is the outlook for the Canucks in the first full year under Rick Tocchet? How's everybody feeling out there, and what do you see ahead this season?
I expect them to be an improved team, especially with some of the additions they made on the back end, like Ian Cole and Carson Soucy. They should be able to defend more effectively. They need to be able to kill penalties more effectively because that shot them in the foot numerous times throughout this past season. But the big question for Canuck fans is going to be, we expect them to be better, but will they be better enough in terms of trying to push for a playoff spot in what is going to be a very competitive Pacific Division? You've got the Vegas Golden Knights, the defending Stanley Cup champions, the Edmonton Oilers, who as long as they have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on their roster will be considered Stanley Cup contenders. You've got a Seattle Kraken club that had a resurgent year, an LA Kings team that is on the rise here and looking to have a bright future. And you would imagine that the Canucks, at the very least, have to finish higher than one of those teams in order to make the playoffs. There is a scenario where they could sneak into the last wild card spot as the fifth team in the Pacific Division, but that also assumes that some of the teams in the Central Division that we're not sure about have poor seasons. So that'll be the interesting part. Is I believe the Canucks will be better. I think they've put some pieces in place to have an improved roster. And if Thatcher Demko can stay healthy, that'll make a big difference for them. But will it be enough for them to sneak back into the playoffs? I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see.
I was fortunate enough to see Vancouver live a few times last year. And this is a little off the board, a question you wouldn't normally get asked, I don't think. But two good Sask boys, Luke Schenn and Ethan Bear, going separate directions. You saw Luke went to Toronto, then signed in Nashville. Ethan's a free agent right now, not signed. What do you see this season for both those two former Canucks that are with your team last year?
Yeah, Ethan Bear's situation is unfortunate because at the end of last season, we spoke to him and he expected to be back in Vancouver. From all accounts, the Canucks expected to bring him back. And then he suffered an injury at the World Championships that's going to have him out until the middle of the season, December, January kind of timeline. And as a result, the Canucks elected not to re-sign him, or not to qualify him anyway, because he had a pretty hefty qualifying number that they would have had to hit that I believe was north of $2 million. So that's just a situation where he had an injury at the absolute worst time at the World Championships. And I imagine he'll land on an NHL roster closer to the time when he's getting back healthy. And, maybe he'll have a better situation he can go to if, there's a contender that has some injuries on the blue line that wants to bring in a guy that can move the puck, that can play up and down your lineup. As far as Luke Schenn goes, I was really happy to see him get the contract in Nashville. He's one of the best guys you'll ever meet in the NHL. And, it's unfortunate the way it ended for him in Vancouver because I believe he wanted to remain a Canuck and it just didn't fit into the organization's plans. So happy to see a guy that at one point was struggling to stay in the NHL really find his game again, be a very important contributor for the Canucks over the past couple of years, and actually play some pretty big minutes up the lineup with guys like Quinn Hughes when they had some injuries. Parlay that into another contract in Nashville. So, I wish Luke Schenn nothing but the best with the Predators.
I appreciate the answers, and you're right. Both tremendous young men, and we hope both stories turn out successfully. Well, Brendan, I include you in that group. Tremendous young man. Enjoy the rest of the summer and what the Okanagan has to offer, and we'll bump into a rink here in the rink here this fall.
Sounds good. Thanks, Rod.
The radio voice of the Vancouver Canucks from Sportsnet 650, Brendan Batchelor.